The Simpsons, like I said, is a phenomenon and has been going on forever. But they started building on that by putting other animated shows on television.
Could you say the top three or four most successful shows at Fox that make Fox big?
Without looking at the actual ratings, I mean, off the top of my head, I would say that Married with Children, the Simpsons, and the X Files were the ones that it was shows that people talked about and it drew attention to Fox.
And some people that also became famous with Fox were Jim Carrey and Jamie Foxx, I heard, with the show
Yes, that's from
Living
In
Color.
Living Color. That was it was a sketch comedy show, and it was a breakout hit for them. They made a huge deal with Disney, and for Disney, it was like, oh my goodness, we now own The Simpsons and Star Wars and the Marvel Cinematic Universe and Avatar. It's so built up their programming. We everybody should live a long, healthy life, but Murdoch knows most of his years are behind him instead of ahead of him. And so like I said, he's putting his chips on news operation. If you're not a conservative, if you're not very right wing, you probably don't watch the Fox News channel. But the Fox News channel is the highest rated cable news channel in the United States. This is this is the Skylark Award. When I got the award, first of all, I wasn't expecting it. I was stunned when I got it. It's given by the New England Science Fiction Association. Um, and I looked at the list of people who've gotten it. It's like some of the major names in science fiction. I would, worthy. This came at a particular time when I was, besides the movie critic stuff, I was also very immersed in local television.
How did you get these informations? I mean, did you interview some people?
Well, I did not get to speak to Rupert Murdoch and Barry Diller. I tried, but many of the other people were willing to speak to me. Um, some of them for extensive interviews, and some very briefly. Um, and it's been all these years. Let me get a couple of the names here. So someone like Lucy Salhaney, who was
Yeah.
one of the network heads, she called me after I had requested an interview. I was not prepared to do the interview, and I started to sort of like ask a question. She goes, "Oh, you're not ready to do this," and we had to reschedule. And then I did my homework and I got a good interview out of her, but I couldn't do it off the top of my head. Now the other one that
But
sticks out,
Lucy, she was one
but
of the first ladies that got this manager position, right?
yes, and no, and she was very important. But I needed to have the questions right in front of me to be able to interview her. Oh, Jamie Kellner, who was was also a very important person. At that time, he's gone now. He's passed away. But at that time, when I was doing the interviews, he was heading up. I think it was the WB, which was the Warner Brothers network. And I tried to reach out to him, and he brushed me off. He left it at this. He said, "When you finish talking to everybody else, give me a call." And I interviewed everybody else. I got all this stuff, and then he very generously, I think I spoke to him maybe 20 minutes or half an hour. It was not the full-fledged interview that I would have liked, but I persevered and I got the interview with him. The early ones, obviously Diller and Jamie Kellner. Um, Garth Ansier was another one. He's one of the programming people who would come over from NBC. Lucy Salhaney, who another key turning point for Fox was when she convinced American NFL football to put a game on Fox, and this was unheard of. What do you mean this fourth network is going to carry professional football? That was a major coup for them.
Yeah.
And because the people who are sports fans, they don't care what channel it's on. They're going to watch the game. And if it's on Fox, that means they're watching Fox. And during the commercial breaks, they're seeing advertising for all the other Fox shows. I think I spoke to almost every person who had headed the network up until the time that I was writing. And I was really pleased that although Barry Diller wouldn't talk to me, he got these two young executives from NBC. And I tell that story at the beginning that they came over to Fox. And this story I remember. Grant Tinker, who was the head of NBC, pointed to this chart on the wall of the three major American networks, and he said, "I will never add a fourth network." He thought they were insane to leave, and they left. And of course, they had a big success. But the Diller, because he liked to pitch people against each other, these two people came over as colleagues and friends. And by the time Diller was through with them, they hated each other. And I was fortunate that both of them were willing to talk to me, because I could easily have seen one of them said, "No, I want nothing to do with this." But in fact, they both talked to me, and I tried to be very fair to both of them, what their contributions were and why they had the falling out.
Yeah, I mean, I read the book and I know the
Yeah.
three networks, but there's some German people that are not in this theme. Could you
Okay,
tell us who the three networks were, and then what the fourth network is?
Okay, I'll give you I'll try to give you a lesson on American television, because I was wondering just how much you know. Um, in the 50s and 60s, even into the 70s, there were primarily three broadcast networks: ABC, CBS, and NBC. Um, I grew up in New York, so we also had educational television, was what we called it. It eventually became public television, or PBS. So that was like a fourth nonprofit network. And then, because New York City, was a huge market, we also had three independent stations, which meant that um, they were not part of a network, which I'll explain in a moment, but they carried movies and sports and reruns of old shows and syndicated programming. Um, the thing with the network is, at that time, the rules keep changing, and I'm not up on what the rules are today. But at the time, a network could only own, I think it was somewhere between 5 and 8 stations. Obviously, that doesn't cover the entire country. So the network would have what they call affiliates. These are independent stations that would sign on and agree to carry the network shows. They would get paid. They would have advertising time on the primetime network shows that were local, so they were making money from the advertising. But that's basically how the system worked. And now Fox comes along, and they're going to start a fourth network, and they did it very cleverly. They didn't say, "All right, we're going to be the fourth network, and here's our whole schedule." It was like, let's start with one night and then 2 nights, and slowly build out. And one of the cleverest things that they did to build the audience, they did a number of things, but one of them, you must have cable television, yes? Okay, I mean, now it's all streaming, and cable is the ancient history. But at the time, cable was the cutting edge. And if you wanted to have really good TV reception, you had cable, as opposed to the rabbit ears, the regular TV antenna. And so, if you were, say, Channel 4, the NBC station, and now you're going to be on the cable box, you wanted to be Channel 4, because that's what people knew you as. You were Channel 4, and if they even knew that what the call letters were, but they knew Channel 4, so they went to 4 on the box, and that's how it worked. So a guy named Preston Padden, uh, who had for a long time worked for I guess it was network stations, and looking at cable as the enemy. Cable is competition. You don't want to deal with cable. Now he's working with Fox. First thing is, Murdoch had bought 20th Century Fox, the studio. So he already had the means of production. He could produce shows. Although it gets very complicated, because a studio might own a network and produce shows for another network. they're like separate parts of the business. But he already had the movie business, and so he started with the TV thing. One of the things they wanted was, like the networks, to own a number of stations, because if they owned them, they had a guaranteed outlet. And ordinarily, the owned stations would be in the biggest markets, New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, places like that. But the problem was Murdoch was Australian.
Yeah.
And the rule was, if you want to own an American station, you got to be an American. And so he, unlike his family at the time, became an American citizen. And then the FCC, which grants the licenses, allowed him to purchase some of these stations.
And at first, the other three networks just thought it would be a joke, so they didn't take Fox serious. And
right, they called it the coat hanger network, because they said if there was you would need a coat hanger on your TV instead of like an antenna that even to find the station it's on. That's why that guy thought it was so important to get them on the cable boxes, because that leveled the playing field. Well, by the time Murdoch came to the United States, he was already a major media mogul. He, in Australia, in England, he owned media properties in the United States, and then he bought 20th Century Fox. And that, suddenly he's a major player in American media. When he became an American citizen, he was able to start buying TV stations, and that allowed him to launch the Fox network bit by bit. Like, we talked about it, that they were very clever. They didn't try to do everything at once. Let's do it one night, 2 nights, we'll build on it. It took them several years to get a full schedule. And they also, they did not fall into the model of the other networks. Right now, and for many years, the network model is prime time is 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. Well, different. I think in Chicago it's 7 to 10, but it's a 3 hour slot. They said, no, we're not going to do 3 hours. What we're going to do is 2 hours a night, and then we're going to tell the local station, you put on your newscast at 10 o'clock, because everybody else is putting on their local newscast at 11. So again, it was counter programming. It's a different band that you had to switch over to a different band to get the channels on the UHF station, which stands for ultra high frequency, as opposed to VHF, which is very high frequency. Well, the VHF stations were basically taken in most of the markets. So a lot of the Fox affiliates now were UHF stations. So they were channel 37, 56, 68. And this guy, Preston Patton, is now going to these stations and saying, you don't want to be channel 68 on the cable box. You want a low number. You want to be with the other networks. And so, say in a particular market, let's say the network stations were 4, 5, and 7. So fine, you could be 6 or 3 or 8. And now people who are flipping around on the cable box are, do I want to watch CBS, ABC, NBC, or Fox? That's how Fox legitimized itself.
Could you please explain me the difference between what is a network, syndication, affiliate, station, group, channel? So
the
words...
networks are basically the ones who are either producing or broadcasting the primetime shows, the newscasts, the major events. The rest, now, the networks program most of the day. If you were watching American television, you basically would have, on a network station, you would have very little on the air except local news that wasn't network. The morning show would be network. Then there might be some syndicated morning programs. There might be soap operas, which would be network, daytime dramas, and then the evening news, and then the primetime program, and then the late night program. This would all be network. But because the networks are only allowed to have a handful of stations, they had to deal with these affiliates to have them put it on. Now, before there was Fox, if you were an independent station, well, what are you going to put on if you don't have any network shows? There were programmers who would do what they call syndication. They would sell their shows. Where, to give an example, I'll say, well, this is going back years and years, but when Star Trek was on NBC, and so if you had an NBC station, you carried Star Trek. That's in the late 60s. Now you get to the 1980s, and they start with Star Trek: The Next Generation. Well, that's not a network show, that's in syndication. They have to go market by market and sell the show. And if they didn't sell it to enough markets, they wouldn't get enough audience, and the show would fail. How did they succeed? Were they able to expand? And something we need to touch on is that the way American advertising on television works is, yes, it's very nice to have the top show, but it's really about what they call the demographics. And if you can attract, especially men 18 to 25, 25 to 40, those are really hard audiences to get outside of sports. So Fox getting NFL football was a big deal. But then getting shows like Beverly Hills 90210 and Melrose Place and Party of Five, that attracted a lot of young viewers who were not being served by the traditional networks. Likewise, the shows like In Living Color, and I don't know if some of these made it over to you, Martin. There were a number of shows that were pitched primarily to African American audiences, also being underserved by the networks. So suddenly, Fox was attracting viewers who, if you were an advertiser and wanted to reach them, that you had to go to Fox because they weren't watching anything else.
So how did it change? When did they say, "Oh, there is a new player"?
It's when they started getting ratings, when it was like, the thing people don't understand about ratings is, if something is you want to be the number one show in the time slot, but nobody gets 100% of the audience. So even a show that's like World Cup Soccer or the Super Bowl or something like that, it's not 100%. That means there are people watching other things on television. So what they realized is they could counter program, and they could sell to advertisers on the basis of the audiences they were attracting. So a show like Married with Children, which was bringing in a young adult audience that appreciated its bawdy, raunchy humor, it didn't have to be number one because it was attracting an audience that advertisers wanted to reach. And that's how they got their foot in the door.
Yeah, I wrote down some shows. You said Married with Children, and I can tell you, in Germany, when I was a child, we watched it whenever it was on TV. We loved it. So they were successful here in Germany too. What were the most successful shows, and when did they start? So could you
well, it's like the Married with Children was one of the early ones. They had a show on with Tracy Ullman, who was an actress comedian, and she had an animated segment that was the original Simpsons. And then her show went away, and they decided to create a TV show of The Simpsons. And it's now the longest running fictional show on American television. It's been on, it's over 30, I think it's over 30 years now. It's like 35 years that it's been on. But the problem was that first season, they had, I think it was 12 episodes, and they had to be drawn. It's animation. They didn't just put the actors in front of the camera, and they kept rerunning them over and over and over until they could get the new episodes. And I remember they told the story about the meeting at the network where the big boss Rupert is there, and so when are we going to get new Simpsons episodes? Well, we're waiting for the animators. It's going to be several months, and they're waiting for him to explode, and he just goes, I guess we're going to have a long wait then. There was nothing they could do. But then The Simpsons became so successful that they actually, one season, they switched it from, it was on a Sunday night on American TV, but they switched it to Thursday night opposite the Cosby Show. And I know, like today, if people think of Cosby at all, it's like a sick joke. But in the 1980s, the Cosby Show was not only the #1 show on television, but he was America's dad. This was a show that everybody loved. And putting The Simpsons on opposite that, even Cosby said, wow, that takes guts. He knew that, the risk they were taking. They knew they were going to beat Cosby, but he also knew that they were going to get an audience share. The something else, and I don't really get too much into this in the book. The 80s is when we start getting VCRs becoming something like in everybody's home. So if I'm watching the Cosby Show, there's nothing to stop me from taping The Simpsons and watching it later.
Yeah.
So the bit by bit, they got these shows on that gained traction. The X-Files, American Idol was another one that caught on. America's Most Wanted. They tried all sorts of things, and a lot of them didn't work. But the ones that did, they ran with it. And the thing that impressed me, coming at this as a movie critic who was writing about television, is when they, in the early years, they said, so they were just on Saturday and Sunday night, and then Monday morning they would look at the ratings. They said it was like a movie company looking at the box office for the weekend. What worked? What didn't work? And now how are we going to adjust it as we go into our next weekend? And so they were really playing it weekend by weekend.
The most successful shows, could you say the top 3 or 4 most successful shows at Fox that make Fox big?
Without looking at the actual ratings, I mean, off the top of my head, I would say that Married with Children, the Simpsons, and the X-Files were the ones that it was shows that people talked about, and it drew attention to Fox. It was suddenly, what is this weird network that somebody started? Oh, that's what they've got, Married with Children. The story I tell in the book is about this woman who was so offended with Married with Children, she wanted to start an advertiser boycott. And of course, it had exactly the opposite effect. It made the show even more popular because people, wow, I hear this new network has this really controversial show. I better go check it out.
And this is also what you wrote in the book. Yeah.
Yes, that some of the advertisers were like, how did you get her to do this? They thought she was a plant, but she was real. She was really offended by the show.
So this is bad news or good news. So you make Fox big with this critic.
Yeah, and in fact, The Simpsons. I've been watching The Simpsons from the beginning. I remember the early years. The Simpsons was a controversial show because Bart was a loudmouth brat who talked back to his parents. He was like, "Don't have a cow, man." And is this what we want to model for our children? Now it's one of the most beloved shows on television. When I was a little kid in the 1960s, the networks had cartoon shows on in the evening. It was early in prime time, but things like the Flintstones and the Jetsons were on for kids or for the family. Then you didn't have cartoons on anymore because that was kid stuff. The Simpsons changed that, and Fox took a gamble on a number of shows. Not all of them worked, but things like Family Guy and King of the Hill. And now Sunday night on Fox is still animation night.
I also wrote down Futurama.
And Futurama, which was by Matt Groening, who was the creator of The Simpsons. And now it gets complicated because Futurama ran on Fox, and then it ended. It didn't have a long run. But then in 2019, Disney acquired 20th Century Fox and Fox Broadcasting. And now they also own a streaming service called Hulu. And they've done new seasons of Futurama on Hulu. So it's still going on.
I wrote down some names of shows that were successful, and also the Power Rangers, and for sure the X-Files. X-Files also made.
Yes. Oh, X-Files was a phenomenon because it was a really intelligent science fiction show. Fox did a number of science fiction shows. The X-Files was their biggest success. They tried a couple of spin-offs that didn't work. They had a number of other shows, some of them which were quite good, but they didn't have the commitment to it. One of my personal favorites was a show called Alienation, which was based on a movie about aliens who come to Earth because they're escaping from a bad situation from their home planet, and how they're integrated into Earth life. And it was very clever, very well done. Apparently, according to the producer of the series, it got canceled because all of the aliens were bald, as was Barry Diller, the head of the network. And so he kind of resented it. But eventually they ended up doing a number of sequel TV movies because the show did have a following.
Very cool. I mean, these were the shows at the beginning. Perhaps some more stars I wrote down. Jennifer Love Hewitt also became famous because
Party of Five. That was another one of these, yeah, you might call teen-oriented soaps. They were soap opera shows that were pitched to a younger audience, and younger audience, there was nothing else for them to watch. If they're looking at what's, you've heard of Saturday Night Live, but that was on Saturday night at 11:30. In terms of primetime network time, most of the shows were geared to older audiences. And so if you were, like that 25-year-old guy, and you're flipping around, you're going to look at Fox. Fox has the edgy material. Fox has shows that have younger characters on it. And in fact, they continued into the late 90s when they created that 70s show. And that 70s show also had a number of people became bankable stars, movie stars out of that. Mila Kunis and Ashton Kutcher. And even not so much movies, but I don't know if Laura Prepon, I think that's how she pronounced it, who was the sort of the love interest of the main character. She went on to do a show called Orange is the New Black that ran for a number of seasons, and she was very good at it. So yeah, the Fox became an incubator for a lot of young up and coming talent.
A funny story I heard these days. Ashton Kutcher is together with Mila Kunis right now.
Yes.
And when they met the first time, she was 14 and he was 19. And in the show, they kissed. And when Mila Kunis started the show, she told the producer that she's 18. And when she was in the show, they found out, oh, okay, shit, she's 14, but they wanted to keep her in. And so the kissing scenes were a little bit crazy for everyone. But now they are together, It's crazy.
Yeah, they went their separate ways and then they got back together again. So interesting story there. And of course, one of the daring things about that, again, showing just how Fox was always sort of like on the edge. Have you ever watched that 70s show?
For sure.
In
Germany, it was successful. Sure.
Okay. One of the things that it was sort of like a running gag on the show was you would see the friends in Eric's basement, and the camera would follow them in a circle as they were having a conversation. And it was like just outside of camera range was either a joint or a bong. They were getting stoned, but you didn't see it on camera, but you would see the smoke rising up. Everybody knew what was going on. And that was, again, the sort of thing that, no, you wouldn't see that on the other American networks.
But this is what it makes special. And I read, I think in your book, that a lot of shows had just one camera shot. Also with Malcolm in the Middle was successful. And they had just this one camera shot instead of 4 cameras.
Yeah, I mean, there's different there were different methods of doing a sitcom, a situation comedy. Sometimes let's do it like a stage production where you've got 3 cameras, and so one's got the wide shot, the other ones are going for the close-ups. Others are doing it like, okay, there's no audience, we'll put in a laugh track or something. We'll just have one camera and we'll follow it wherever the action is. And there's a show on now. There was a show called The Big Bang Theory that spun off a show called Young Sheldon. And it is now spun off a show called George and Mandy's First Marriage. Uh, the The Big Bang Theory was done traditionally on a stage with an audience. Then, when they did Young Sheldon, they went in another direction. They said, "No, no, we're just going to have the camera following things around." And now, it's they try different things. It's the idea is not to look like everything else that's on television at the moment.
And I like it. I think it's
Yeah.
very good. Yeah, I also wrote down 24. 24 was successful.
Oh yes, 24 had a very successful run. Some great cast. I mean, besides Kiefer Sutherland, who already was a name, and a number of interesting people on that show. But the very concept of it, like we're going to do 24 episodes and it's going to follow one day in the life of the characters. And you would say, 3 in the morning, who's awake at this hour? Well, they are, because the country's going to blow up or the president's been kidnapped or something's going on. Yeah, very exciting show. Of course, it was also a bit of a political fantasy, because he did things that no government agent would be allowed to do.
And
But yeah, no, I enjoyed it. I was a fan of the show.
My dad and we also watched it. He still loves it. He watched it a few months ago again.
Yeah. So Fox just kept, like I said, pushing the envelope. They didn't always succeed. One of the things that we haven't touched on yet, they did a number of reality shows. Some of it was serious, like America's Most Wanted or Cops, where they were, following police in action. America's Most was it America's Most Wanted was a serious documentary type show of going after wanted criminals. On the other hand, you had these America's Funniest Home Videos or things like that. And I remember talking to the producer, one of them, and he said they literally could not come up with things that were so over the top that they couldn't do. He said there was one thing that they came up with, and they decided, no, we're not going there. It was how about like America's most embarrassing vomiting moments or something like that. And he said he was imagining how they would promote it, like coming up next, 21 Jump Street, which were again appealing to young men. It was undercover cops, and they were like in high school and college situations, although the cops were supposed to be a little older. And it was a breakout for Johnny Depp. That was where people first know, well, who is this guy? And one of the stories I uncovered in doing the research, I spoke to the producer of the show, and he said, the show was a big success. And then Johnny Depp started doing movies, and he had some success there. And very often, an actor on TV who suddenly has a breakout movie role, they walk away from the television show. And Johnny Depp called up the producer, and the producer was expecting him to say, "I'm gone." And he said, "If the show is renewed, on Fox, we're under contract. I will honor that contract. I will stick with you." As it turned out, the show was not renewed on Fox, and so Depp was able to go on to do his movie career. But I remember the producer telling me, I think it was Stephen Cannell, he was so blown away by this young actor who had everything opening up in front of him, who said, "No, I will honor my contract."
So Johnny Depp became famous because of Fox and the show. He
Yes.
And also the same with Ed O'Neill and Christina Applegate with Married with Children, right?
Yes. Yeah, there were a number, and Ed O'Neill. Ed O'Neill is an interesting story, because he, suddenly, he became a star from Married with Children as the father. But then he had a problem, and this is not an unusual problem in American television. You get typecast, and so he wanted to do a dramatic role in some TV movie or something, and they came over and they said, "We're going to have to pay you off. We can't use you." Why not? Well, you're doing a good job. People are laughing because they look at you and they see Married with Children.
Yes.
And it took him a number of years to get beyond that and reestablish himself as an actor. Many times, an actor in that situation will go into directing, where they're behind the camera.
And some people that also became famous with Fox were Jim Carrey and Jamie Foxx, I heard, with the show
Yes, that's from
Living
In
Color.
Living Color. That was it was a sketch comedy show, and it was a breakout hit for them. And one of it was it's interesting because it was Jamie Foxx or somebody in his family who was like sort of like running the show, but it was an integrated show. So you had it appealed to black audiences and to white audiences, and it ran for a number of years, and a number of breakout stars came from it. Fox, yeah, when that show in Living Color first went on, they were nervous at Fox. They're doing some really edgy racial material. Are we going to get in trouble for this? And in fact, there was an audience that it wasn't racist. It's just like it was hitting the metaphor, the third rail. It was touching on topics that ordinarily American television didn't touch, and people ate it up.
And perhaps this was the secret of Fox. They did things the other networks didn't do, right?
Exactly. That was you want to know what was the secret of their success. They reached out to audiences that were being underserved. They were doing material that wasn't being covered. We were talking about The Simpsons. One of the interesting things about The Simpsons, like I said, is a phenomenon and has been going on forever. But they started building on that by putting other animated shows on television. MASH, which was based on a movie. It's American doctors and troops during the Korean War. And there was one guy played by Jamie Farr who had been acting for years. But the character he played was someone who wanted to get out of the military. And so he was trying to convince everyone he was crazy by wearing dresses. Well, it was a very funny character, but when MASH went off the air, he couldn't work anymore because everybody saw him as that crazy guy in the dress from MASH.
Yeah, I also wrote down the show Who Wants to Marry a Millionaire? A multimillionaire. And there was
Yeah, that was they started going from the reality into some of the game show sorts of things with American Idol was a bit of that.
Temptation
They're not
Island.
shows that interest me, so I haven't followed them closely, but
Yeah,
they did a number of those.
Temptation Island, I wrote down, and Joe Millionaire is, I think, almost the same. Like
Yeah.
and King of the Hill, I did watch, but I wrote it down. And for sure, the NFL stuff you told me with this sport licenses, they got a big audience.
Oh my God. CBS had been carried, it's like there's only so many games they can carry, in a season. And CBS it was one of the major networks and had been carrying NFL football forever. And suddenly NFL football signed to deal with Fox and CBS doesn't have it. I think that shook up the television industry more than anything else at that time, that Fox took NFL football right out from under CBS. Of course, we're in a different world now with streaming. It's a totally different thing where now the question is, if you can only watch a game on a service you subscribe to, then that means if you don't subscribe to it, you're going to miss those games. Whereas if it's over the air, you could just turn on your TV. So there's some question about where television is going. But television has been evolving, for the last 60, 70 years, the same way movies did. I started as a movie critic in the 80s, and I was told movies are over. Nobody wants to go to the movies anymore. Everybody's going to have satellite dishes. They're going to watch at home. Well, we're still watching at home. We have streaming services now. People still want to go to the movies. And it's the same thing. So cable was going to put broadcast out of business. It didn't. And then now we have streaming. Well, let's see what happens to broadcast. Because now what's happening in the States is that the networks are still producing shows, but often those shows are the company owns the network and a streaming channel. And so, like, for example, we have well, I mentioned George and Mandy's First Marriage. It's on Thursday nights on CBS, and then on Friday you can start watching it on Paramount Plus.
Hmm.
And it's the same thing with a lot of different shows that they're on. Like The Simpsons is on Fox on Sunday night, and then starting on Monday, it's on Hulu. So they're integrating it in ways that I don't think people could have predicted 10, 15 years ago.
You always find a way to sell the product.
And then eventually, because Murdoch is and always has been primarily a news guy. I mean, his company is News Corp. That event, as he's in his 90s now, but it was like 2019 or a few years before, I think he realized I want to get out of the entertainment business. Let me cash in, and because he knew he was leaving everything to particularly his eldest son. Let me leave him News Corp. Well, it'll be the Fox News Channel, the Fox Business Channel, the newspaper outlets, whatever, and just get the entertainment stuff out. And so they made a huge deal with Disney. And for Disney, it was like, oh my goodness, we now own The Simpsons and Star Wars and the Marvel Cinematic Universe and Avatar. It's so built up their programming, and it's why Hulu and Disney Plus, which is they're both owned by Disney, are very popular streaming services because they have access to all sorts of stuff people want to see.
Do you think this was a bad step to sell these very important shows Fox became big with to this, let's say, left Disney company?
Yeah, well, Disney was exactly a minor player. So I think it was a calculated decision that he wanted to get out of entertainment and focus on news, and figuring that's what he wanted to leave to his son. I think that was probably what was going through his head. He could have kept it, but I also just look how things are changing. Even like in 2019 when they made the deal with Disney, streaming was not that big a deal, but he could see that things were evolving, and would they really be able to continue to counter program? Because in fact, something we haven't talked about is that after Fox, you remember it started out with Grant Tinker telling the two guys leaving, I will never put a fourth network up there. Well, by the mid 90s, you had 6 American networks because Paramount created UPN and Warner Brothers created the WB. Eventually, the two of them merged, and it's currently a service called the CW. But shows like Star Trek Voyager and Buffy the Vampire Slayer came out of these 5th and 6th networks. So suddenly it was like the game was changing, and I think he saw that, we had a good run. It's time to move on to something else.
When we talk about things that changed, until you have finished your book, and when we take a look at Fox right now, what changed? I mean, you said it right now, but so this movie stuff, they wanted to leave and they want to focus on news. Is this the most
important? On news, because that's really where he always came from. That was the basis of his fortune, of his whole widespread conglomerate, was newspapers and magazines and these news outlets. And so that's what he's focusing on. Listen, if you're not a conservative, if you're not very right wing, you probably don't watch the Fox News Channel, but the Fox News Channel is the highest rated cable news channel in the United States. Now, demographically, they skew very old. If you put on Fox News, you'll see a lot of ads that are geared clearly to an older audience, but still, they are attracting an audience. It's profitable for them. So I think he's essentially been a gambler all his life, and he's made a gamble, and he's decided he's placing his bet on the future of news.
I mean, I have been in New York City at the Trump election 2024, and so I compared Fox News with New York Times, and in Germany it changed like that too. And
Yeah.
I think it was crazy to see that the same news was exactly the other side.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And this is widely noted that uh it's like you're in a different universe. You're through the mirror if you're watching Fox News as opposed to CNN or MSNBC or the New York Times, because they have different standards. The Fox network, Fox Broadcasting, is now part of Disney. Murdoch, you can look it up. It's 2, 3
20th
years
Century
ago now.
Fox, he sold it.
Yeah,
This is
he
what I want.
sold 26. Yeah,
This is what I would
he
like
sold
to talk
26
to you about.
Fox. Yeah,
Yeah.
he just wanted to have the news operation. And people who know about Fox News, which is a very conservative, some would even say propagandistic outlet, I only touch on very lightly here because my story is about the broadcast network. On Disney Plus, I would imagine it's in Germany as well. You can watch all the Simpsons, everything, all like 35 years of the Simpsons, because now it's on Disney.
Crazy. Okay. And
Yeah.
now we see it is all about the money.
Yes.
Movie companies we still have, and the most are, I would say, would be left and not conservative. Do you think because of this that he sold 20th Century Fox, it is perhaps not so good for the movie sector because we lost
Yeah.
some conservative?
This has been the story going on 20 or 30 years now, is the consolidation of the media. I remember back in the 90s, it's like maybe a dozen companies own all the movie and TV and magazine and book publishers. We're down to, I think, maybe like 5 or 6 now. And now in the United States, Paramount wants to buy Warner Brothers, which includes, a number of things besides the movie studios. There were lawsuits going on trying to prevent this. Going, well, wait a second, what's going to happen now if you have, 4 studios? I mean, Disney got Fox, Paramount's going to have Warner Brothers. Um, who's left?
Yeah.
There's Columbia Pictures, and some independents.
But
Universal.
yeah.
Yeah.
Here, so conservative people watch Fox. Are there other channels like or networks like Fox, or is it the only one for
Oh
conservative?
no, there's several conservative ones, although Fox beats them. They're way out in front. Like the next closest one is a news channel called Newsmax that doesn't get ratings anything like Fox. But then the other news channels, not counting business channels and things like that, CNN, which is going to be part of if it goes through, the Paramount Warner Brothers deal, which already owns CBS News. So there's a real question of what's going to happen there. And then there's MSNBC, which changed to MS Now because they were originally a project. It gets so complicated. They were a partnership of NBC and Microsoft. And I don't know. I don't think Microsoft is involved with it anymore. But NBC decided they didn't want to be involved with it anymore, and they created a new company and spun it off. So this MS Now is now a separate entity from NBC. They're not connected anymore. Whereas up until a few months ago, you would have people who were on the NBC News who might also be on the MSNBC cable channel. And MSNBC is considered more liberal. CNN, it depends who you ask. If you ask them, they're straight ahead, moderate. We try to get all sides. If you ask somebody who's liberal, oh, they're selling out there like Fox. If you ask somebody who's conservative, oh, they're far left. So,
And CBS, I thought CBS could be a little bit conservative, is it right?
well, CBS had a long an honorable history as a fiercely independent news operation. I mean, this is going back pre-television, going back to their radio days. But now, since they were acquired by Paramount, there's a number of critics have been saying that CBS is sort of like bending to Trump. They would probably deny it. I'm sure they have stories that are critical, but they are under fire these days.
What do you think is going to happen with Fox in the next 5 to 10 years? Will they change anything, or what do you think?
Well, and a lot of it's going to depend on what goes on with American politics. I mean, if we swing to the left, as is expected in our midterm elections this November, Fox could lose, the Fox News channel could be losing ratings because people are just going to say, well, we lost. But in terms of the Fox Entertainment, which was the focus of my book and the focus of most of our discussion, they are thriving as part of the Disney empire. As I said, you could watch 35 years of The Simpsons on the Disney Plus channel now. And, like they acquired the Star Wars universe and they're creating new shows. And now this summer, there'll be a new Star Wars movie coming out that's a spinoff from one of the shows that they did. So they're where we're going to be 10 years from now, who knows? I mean, 10 years ago, I couldn't have told you where we'd be today. But it's clear that people want to be entertained, and that Disney, which has a long history, in the entertainment business, they are making the most of the properties they acquired from Fox. So I think those properties are going to continue to thrive.
Do you think Rupert Murdoch killed Fox a little bit because he sold 20th Century Fox?
No, like I said, the Fox Entertainment properties are doing very well under Disney, and Murdoch says that his focus is on news, and look, everybody should live a long, healthy life, but Murdoch knows most of his years are behind him instead of ahead of him, and so like I said, he's putting his chips on news operation. The book is still in print. Let me tell you about this book. I wrote this. I told you the story how I got the deal to do the book. What happened was I finished it. We were literally at the point where we were cleaning up the loose ends when the publisher decided they didn't want to do it, and they say to me, "Did you get signed releases from everybody you interviewed?" I said, "No, you never asked me to do that. What sort of nonsense is that?" It was clear they wanted me to breach the contract and not publish the book. I contacted my agent. We decided she told me I didn't have to give my advance back, but that was it. We just pulled the manuscript from them, and it took another 3 years for her to sell it to another publisher, which is why there's that last chapter about the 21st century and beyond that doesn't quite fit the pattern of all the other chapters in the book, because every other chapter is season by season. And what happened was, it had been 2 or 3 years for me to get the book to another publisher, and they said, "Well, could you bring it up to date?" So I wrote another chapter where I brought it up to date. That's the behind the scenes story.
Crazy.
I have written 5 novels, and they're humorous novels. One of them is Father of the Bride of Frankenstein, which is about a reanimated corpse who marries into a Jewish family. And then my latest one is a Talent to Amuse, about a writer who meets his muse. For real, the muses are real, and he gets to meet all of the classic muses and all the ones that have been born in the millennia since the original Greek 9 muses.
And for sure,
So,
I will put the links of the books into the description also, from the Fourth Network. I want to say thank you very much for your time, and it's so cool to talk to you, and I think the video is going to be very cool. Checkarell. Checkarell. Best videos ever.